Right, welcome. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to the week ahead. It's where we set the tone for you for the week ahead on the news front. As always, I'm your host, Liesl Wilson. Let's take a look at your top stories for this hour. As South Africa continues to rebuild after civil unrest left a trail of death and destruction, the country today marks Nelson Mandela International Day. 14,701 new COVID-19 infections have been reported in South Africa. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases has also reported that a further 291 people have died of COVID-19 related complications. In sport, Louis Oosthuizen is aiming to lift the claret jug for a second time as he goes into the final round of the British Open at Royal St George's with a one-shot lead. Right now, our top story at this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa says despite the recent acts of violence, looting and vandalism which have caused unrest, South Africans have united to rebuild and defend the country. Ramaphosa was in Soweto, Johannesburg for Mandela Day in his capacity as the president of the African National Congress. He's encouraged the public to do more to help each other as he joined a clean-up campaign following the violent protest action.
This incident has really united us, it has solidified us, and we must emerge out of this much stronger and much more capable than we were before this incident happened. And all I can say is that we shall never be defeated, because a united people will never be defeated.
Well, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on the world to use International Mandela Day to reflect on the ongoing injustices and look at ways of achieving peace. Well, he says the vaccine hoarding and violent conflict go against the values and spirits of the late former President Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela International Day is an opportunity to reflect on the life and legacy of a legendary global advocate for dignity, equality, justice and human rights. Each year, on this day, Nelson Mandela's birthday, we pay tribute to this extraordinary man who embodied the highest aspirations of the United Nations and the human family. Madiba's calls for solidarity and an end to racism are particularly relevant today as social cohesion around the world is threatened by division. Societies are becoming more polarized, with hate speech on the rise and misinformation blurring the truth, questioning science and undermining democratic institutions. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has made these ills more acute and rolled back years of progress in the global fight against poverty. As always, in times of crisis, it is the marginalized and discriminated against who suffer the most, often while being blamed for problems they did not cause. The pandemic has shown the vital importance of human solidarity and unity, values championed and exemplified by Nelson Mandela in his lifelong fight for justice. No one is safe until all are safe, and each of us has a part to play. Let us be inspired by Madiba's message to each of us that each of us can make a difference in promoting peace, human rights, harmony with nature and dignity for all. Let us all honor Madiba's call to action and be empowered by his legacy. Thank you.
Now, the annual Trek for Mandela reaches its peak today. For more on Mandela Day celebrations, we're going to be bringing in Richard Mabaso. He's the CEO of the Mbumba Foundation. The now 6-time successful Mount Kilimanjaro summit here joins us to chat about the Trek for Mandela. It's an initiative that and also perhaps provide updates on their journey within the summit window after starting their climb on the 14th of July. Richard, a very good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I think for those who are tuned in, who've been following your progress over the past few days, perhaps give us an update on the team's journey. I mean, where are they within the summit window? How have the past few days been since leaving South Africa?
Thank you, and a good afternoon to you, Liesl, and your viewers. It has been a tough one, I won't lie. Since COVID-19 has restricted us in terms of traveling, it has been very difficult even to move from South Africa to Tanzania. So instead of our normal route, we had to change a lot of things, and they left on the 12th of July instead of the normal date, which is the 13th, and come back on the 20th. So now we had to add 2 days extra, but they've been doing great. They traveled safely, they landed, and they got all their COVID tests done. And then they started hiking on the 14th of July. And for the past few days, they've been roughing it up the mountain, got to base camp. And unfortunately, we still haven't received the news yet because we know that Tanzania is an hour ahead. So we're still expecting to hear from them at least in an hour or two from now. But so far, so good. They are all in high spirit. They've been very excited. I mean, you can imagine they left the country with, so many challenges. Some parts of our country were going through turmoil. So you can imagine what's happening in their heads, in their minds around what is happening back at home. But we really congratulate them already because we said the fact that they were able to take the first step to say, we are going no matter what. We believe that their summit today will not only be for themselves or the girl child only, but it will be the pride of us as a nation.
Richard, I mean, on that note, I think before we get into the initiative and how it came to be, walk us through who's joined in on the expedition this time round. And as you mentioned, having a lot of time to reflect on the journey. I mean, what are some of the sentiments that have been echoed this time round as people have also had to conquer their own inner mountain?
Yes, absolutely. And as you rightfully said, conquering our own mountains, it starts with what we're seeing currently, going on around the world, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's in South Africa, going through what the country is going through right now. We need to always take these challenges as an opportunity for us as a nation to sit down, reflect, look back. And I believe that we are a nation of conquerors because if you remember, that about 27 years ago, we managed to defeat apartheid. So now when we are faced with situations like this, I think for me personally, and I mean the climbers themselves, before they left, talking to them, everyone, I think there's a consensus around inequalities. There's consensus around us having to reflect, to look inwardly and come up with what is it that we need to do as society to make sure that there is no one left behind. So we've been engaging, obviously, as you know, outside of the track now. When we go, whether you go to the communities where we do our hikes, like for example, the Drakensberg, where you talk to the local people. There was so much despair, and people are losing hope. And we are in some form of a wonderland, and it's been really inspiring to see that out of adversities, you then start finding people who are coming up and saying, we can conquer, we can overcome this situation. So yes, we are going through what we are going through as a nation, but looking back where we come from, I strongly believe that this one too shall pass.
I mean, Richard, if you can divulge who is on the trip, it would be interesting to see who we can support, as we await the imminent news of the summiting. But going back to the intention of the initiative Caring for Girls and looking at the support that it provides to women and young girls, with hygiene management, access to sanitary pads, and also overall community development. What have been some of the highlights with the initiative since it began back in 2012?
Since it began back in 2012, we've really been amazed at how South Africans and the world over has come to the fore and said, what is it can we do to to support the cause? And as you know that currently Professor Thulima Donsela is one of the climbers who she's going back for the second time. We have executives from big corporates, we have people from the United States, but I think for me, before I go deeper into the program itself, I would like to acknowledge and appreciate the different partnerships we have with organizations such as, your DSCAMs. We have organizations like Africa who are coming forth, Old Mutual Foundation, who are coming forth and saying, let's do this together. So now to give you an idea, since 2012, Caring for Girls has reached more than 1.2 million girls throughout South Africa. And the way we reach those girls is through corporate support. So every climb, when we go up the mountain, we're inviting people and the public in general to play their part. And today, for example, being Mandela Day, we say if you can't do much, you can, through Caring for Girls, donate at least 10 Rand to support at least that one girl child. But as you know that in 2020, we started experiencing the pandemic, which made it extremely difficult for us to reach out to as many girls as we had hoped for in the beginning of the year. However, we had to find new ways of how to do that, to reach to more girls and do that even with the challenges and the restrictions, but try to do it effectively and efficiently. So last year alone, we managed to reach a complete new set of girls or group of girls, which is above 67,000. And with that, we worked with organizations such as Old Mutual, Africa, to reach out to even matriculants, because you can imagine that I've just heard earlier that in some parts of our country during the unrest, about over 50 schools have been vandalized.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that we are already restrained in terms of the academic year on the calendar, but now the matriculants who are expected to sit for their examinations in about just over 4 months' time from now, or if not less, they are expected to sit for the exams, but they have no infrastructure, they have no facilities. So in terms of getting corporate South Africa, individuals, government, everyone to work together, it's so paramount, Lizelle, to make sure that these kids are not further disadvantaged. So you can imagine that in general, we spoke earlier about inequalities, which makes it very difficult for some of these girls to be at par with the majority of kids who are, with most of the kids who have better opportunities.
Yeah.
But now you have the pandemic, and then on top of that, you have the unrest. So you can imagine that for a matriculant, it will become very difficult. But these organizations, they came forth and said, let's try our best to reach as many matriculants as possible to help them with application for university and NSFAS. Last year, we managed to reach just over 10,000. As I'm speaking to you right now, we've reached more than 3,000 matriculants, and our goal is to reach more than what we've reached last year. So it's incredibly challenging, but at the same time, I would like to say that we do have at least a glimmer of hope, because we have corporates and individuals and people who care about the ones who are less fortunate.
Richard, you obviously, you've spoken about the challenges that the country have faced. Women, not only suffering on the back of exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. You've spoken about the looting and protests that have affected the schooling curriculum. And then we also look at these systemic issues in South Africa. You're looking at issues of a lack of equity, lack of equality, and a lack of inclusivity. So, we're just with everyone mobilizing, coming together to support in ways that they can. When we look at, your return, when we look at what we can expect from you going forward, given the demands that have been placed on the initiative and the foundation by COVID-19, what can we expect going forward upon your return?
Upon our return, in fact, before they even return, we've already started, because currently our team is on the ground in KZN. They've transported 1,000 food parcels that are being distributed as we speak in KZN. And already I'm receiving telephone calls from different partners saying, what can we do? So one of the biggest drive that we are tapping into, obviously using our infrastructure in terms of vehicles that we use to transport sanitary pads all over the country. We've been using the vehicles since lockdown, the first day of lockdown last year to date, to deliver food parcels. So this weekend, our team has sent 1,000 food parcels down to KZN, but we're looking at least mobilizing more resources, because our goal for this year is to say, from today, being Mandela Day, can't we do our best or rally our resources to work with partners to reach at least 67,000 people with food parcel between now and the end of December 2021. And also we have partnerships like Westpac Lifestyle, who as a company in their own, they are launching today reach for 67,000 new girls with sanitary pads. So as I'm saying to you, as I've mentioned to you earlier, Lizelle, is that we just find that corporates and a lot of businesses are still doing their best to come to the fore and say, what is it that we can do? And do it the best possible way that they can. And maybe let me also highlight that with the matriculants program, we really are in dire need for resources to make sure that we can reach all the matriculants that we've set ourselves to reach. For instance, when you go to a school, you need to have a computer. So our facilitators, when they go to the school, they need to have a computer. They need to have access to data to make sure that when we sit down, it's a one-on-one. You start with career guidance, career counseling. You then help them with the application process from selecting the first option to the very last option. By the time our team leave the school, each learner must have a reference number to say that they have applied at a university X or Y or Z, because in order for them to even get an opportunity to apply for bursaries, the companies that are offering bursaries, they want to know if you are accepted or if you are on standby at a tertiary institution facility. So it's very important that as we celebrate, commemorate, or reflect on Mandela Day today, we must always think about that one person who does not have that one little resource or that one little thing that can become an opportunity for them to unlock the potential.
Absolutely, Richard. And again, thank you for joining us. Wishing you and the team all the best. Safe travels. Congrats again for flying the flag high for Nelson Mandela once again as we continue to honor his legacy this Mandela Day. We look forward to seeing you all return home very, very soon. Well, we'll take a quick ad break. We continue with more news and updates on the other side of this. This is the week ahead. Welcome back to the week ahead. We continue with our Nelson Mandela Day celebrations. To date, 212 unknown people have died, whilst 25,000 military personnel have been deployed amid violence, protests and looting scenes most concerning since the country's transition into democracy. As we observe Mandela Day today on the backdrop of a country inflicted by socio-economic challenges exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to be chatting to Sello Hatang. He's the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We're going to be exploring our Rainbow Nation, ways to find hope and emulate the ideals of the late Utata Madiba. Sello, a very good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. I think just before we get into what the day has in store for us, you know, when we celebrate Nelson Mandela Day, it would benefit South Africa perhaps to reflect on what his legacy actually means for the nation, particularly at this juncture.
Thank you very much, Liesl. I think for us as an institution, that's an important start. For one to always remember that with the fractured history that we've had, Madiba was a person who always advocated for peace. But that if there was a need for one to then be fighting to ensure that you restore what's wrong with our nation, he would do it. And in our case, in terms of poverty and inequality, it's time that we make sure that we fight them with everything we have, because the recent unrest just needed a trigger point, something to light up the fire, as it were, for them to then get to be as big as they were. So it's important that we ask ourselves, how did we get here? And what do we need to do to change the way we've been doing things? And in other words, the normal can't be allowed to continue because it hasn't worked for us. So the looting that happened tells you that it didn't work for us. So let's try and change it.
Absolutely, Sello. And then when we look at and reflect on the violence which resulted in the mass looting and destruction, how do we then begin to address the fault lines associated with the triple threats of poverty, unemployment and inequality?
Look, it takes one political will to do the right thing, to fight corruption with everything we have. Because if we are to fight corruption, we will then turn the wheel. You can't accept that in a country as wealthy as South Africa, we can have the levels of unemployment that we have. And part of it is because corruption has been stealing from the poor. It's been stealing from all of us. And we must then uproot it. The third part of trying to change things around is to ensure that we don't normalize the abnormal. It's become normal to just see people poor. It's become normal to see people begging on the streets. It's become normal for lawlessness even. So the fourth one is the rule of law. We must be constitutional beings. We have to, not just us as the elite and the poor too. So everybody must try to then observe the rule of law. And also to recognize that, like Madiba did, Madiba acknowledged and recognized that he was a leader himself, and there was a leader within, in other words.
Yeah.
Until such time that we stop waiting for a big man to lead us, that there is a great Messiah who's going to lead us, we are going to be in trouble. So the many people who've lost their lives will remain a blight in our country's history. To say that we shouldn't have lost so many people during the unrest that were absolutely unnecessary. And it's something that we should have avoided. The last thing that would be important for us to build that nation is that there needs to be accountability also, from particularly from government.
Yeah.
When it comes to issues of security, it can't be right, Liesl, that to this day, you still have to look behind, particularly when you're a woman, that there can be any violence that then breaks and it will affect you more than it does anyone else.
Yeah.
Our homes have become not sanctuaries, but they've become a site for thieves, for thugs to come and steal from us, sometimes to even take our lives. So that kind of thing can't be allowed in a normal society.
Yeah, absolutely. Perpetuating cycles of poverty and, economic and socioeconomic traumas. But I'm so glad you've spoken about the issue of leadership, Sello, because this week, it really highlighted new levels of despondency. There were harsh lessons for leaders, many of whom were at the center of the country's transition to a new South Africa and in building this new nationhood. So when we look at the issue of leadership, commitment, accountability, and even communication at large, what was highlighted through this crisis? And then in the same breath, when we reflect and shine the spotlight on ourselves, how do we begin to show leadership wherever we find ourselves?
Well, I think what was very clear is that our crime intelligence systems are not as effective as it should be. Intelligence generally, that there needs to be more that can be done to beef that up. The fact that we are caught napping in terms of the scale of the problem, and also the miscommunication and all kinds of different communication that was coming out of government, exposed that we need to ready ourselves for disasters like this. But we are not unique. We can take away as South Africans from the fact that we are not unique. Many democracies which are bigger than us have had these kind of disasters and they were caught napping, but we must get better. The second one is presence on the ground. This is not just of government, by the way, but of leaders who are in the NGOs, who are in the social movements, etc., for people to then show that they can be the leader. If you look at what happened, if I give you one example of the Northwest, you have one individual, Mr. Molosangwe, who then decided it's not happening here. We are not going to be breaking into shops. And many communities, the reason it didn't happen in 7 provinces is that there was one individual who said, I need to be counted. And it then needs, they said, I'm not going to let this thing go because not in my name will it happen. So I think it's important that we acknowledge those kind of people and thank them for the work that they did. The fact that my Maponya Mall here in Soweto is still standing is because of that kind of leadership, of people who said, count me in. It's not. I'm not going to be breaking into any shops because it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So those kind of things are lessons we should learn. That leadership does not come from the president only. It doesn't come from the minister. It's, in other words, you don't have to occupy an office.
Yeah.
You can be a leader in your own right. Like Madiba taught us that when he took the baton of this leadership, he actually started in the youth league, and he started as a young person back then. And it's important that young people show that leadership.
Speaking about some of the ideals that he stood for, I mean, you know, some reports suggested that scenes emerging from KZN, you know, were remnants of the late 80s. This is racial tensions, tribalism, and racism were reported. It's the very antithesis of unity and the Rainbow Nation. Also worrying concerns about it escalating. How do you think we respond to this as a nation, given what Nelson Mandela stood for in terms of unity and equality?
I think what's happening in Phoenix particularly is telling us that we need to reckon with the past that we had thought that we had gone through. It's telling us, Liesl, that you can't relax in a country where inequality is as it is, and it's race-based inequality as well. The fact that the racial fractures come as a result of political tensions tells you that we need to do more as a nation. It's been worrying, and would like to plead with people out in Phoenix that you cannot continue to do what's been happening. That Black people are still stopped in some places in KZN from shopping by virtue of just being Black. And that can't be right in a country where actually the majority is Black. And anti-Black racism needs to be stopped on its track. But at the same time, we must also say, reckoning with the work that needs to be done, it's unfinished business. People like Ntate Dumisa Ntsebeze, Terry Bell, said we must deal with those things that Kulumani has been saying we need to deal with. So the Truth Commission was but a phase, a small part of what needs to be done. We now need to do the long haul, go for the long haul where we change people's lives in terms of race relations, in terms of building wealth in townships, and building wealth in terms of people being able to just have access to jobs and create jobs. Until such times that local government, for example, then takes charge of ensuring that they build better systems for delivering services, we are in trouble. So I think all these things are saying, let's reckon with that past, but we must start with me as an individual. How can I lead in my own corner?
Policy and change, Selo. I think just to wrap up this conversation, I mean, without keeping you any longer as well, there are many activities that have been planned as a foundation, but also the world over. Walk us through what we can expect. I do know that there's a webinar happening later. And what are some of the other initiatives you've heard of around the world?
So this morning, there was a run in Spain, where there was a marathon in Spain. In Italy, they also observed Madiba through the film festival, which was dedicated to Madiba because it started today. If you look at in Portugal, there's sporting activities that are recognizing Madiba, including also how young people in the form of school children, how they can continue to contribute and observe Madiba's legacy. Here in South Africa, we've had many leaders go out, some of them for the first time, where they are saying, let's try rebuild where we stopped. Today, we were with both former Miss Universe and Miss South Africa, where both of them said, we need to then be trying to rebuild our nation. So we are now, I'm in Chokoza Park at the moment, where we have planted 67 trees. And again, climate change has taught us that until such time that we do differently, we are in trouble because we are not going to be able to have this the environment that we enjoy at the moment. So let's plant trees. The other one that I thought it's important is that we also went to clean in Protea. And I think cleaning shouldn't just be something that we do just for today. Archbishop Tutu once said that if there's one thing that South Africans have mastered is littering. He said that we have made littering we've turned it into an Olympic sport. I think we need to stop all that littering, because the littering that we're doing is impacting in the environment in a very bad way. So climate change will catch up with us because of the littering that we're doing. So that's the kind of work. But then the last one was food. So we have distributed food at a center that looks after predominantly child-headed households, and also at an old age home where it's carrying old people there. Remember that Madiba said that you can measure the society's goodness or not in how it looks after the vulnerable, being children and old people. So let's try our best to do that. And later we'll then be in a webinar where it's about leadership. How do we hand over leadership to the next generation, the baton of leadership to the next generation?
Selaha Tang, we leave the conversation there. CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, chatting to us about Nelson Mandela Day. Again, commemorated today, the day where people the world over traditionally perform acts of service, needed now more than ever as the country deals with its realities 27 years into democracy. Well, it is time for a quick ad break. We continue on the other side of this. Please stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the Week in Review. Bonga Makanya, Secretary of the WITS Rethinking Economics for Africa, joins us for youth perspective on the aftermath of this week's protests and looting as we observe Nelson Mandela Day. Bonga, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. You know, I think when we just look at the mammoth tasks that lie ahead in the aftermath of what has transpired this past week alone, we're also looking at the high unemployment stats released by Stats South Africa's quarterly labour force survey. 32.6% in 2021, youth unemployment at 46.3%. These are worrying signs for future labour force of our country, exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic, you know, also dealing with triple threats of poverty, inequality and unemployment. How did we get here as a country?
Hi, Liesl, and thank you so much for having me on your show today, and greetings to your listeners. Look, I think South Africa has historically always faced structural issues, you know, informed by our past and our legacy of apartheid, where a large number, millions of people were unskilled and denied access to education. So for me, that's always the first point of departure when looking at the unemployment crisis, is that we have a vast number of people who are literally sitting at home unemployed simply because they don't have the skills. And then now, post-94, the government has made little efforts to make sure that these people are skilled at a basic level, from basic education and even at a tertiary level. You look at the issues of access there. So those are the problems when it comes to the unemployment from a government perspective, that they've not upskilled all of these people. There's about 7.2 million people sitting at home currently in South Africa. And that's directly as a result of them not having adequate skills and them then resorting to criminal activities to try and advance themselves socially and economically. Because, I mean, even those who do end up having skills, when they leave the university space or tertiary education space and try to find a job, it's very difficult to find a job. So the prospects of really economic prospects, even through those who have been skilled, are quite low for a number of economic reasons. I mean, for example, Thabo Mbeki once complained about the private sector not playing a more of a meaningful role in job creation. They're sitting on huge volumes of capital, which they're not reinvesting into our economy, expanding their firms, employing people, and because of and especially the banks as well, who are not giving out loans to small businesses because they think they're going to go under or not do well. So there's a lot of other structural problems, which even if you have the skills, the market is simply not absorbing the people because most of the firms are simply not expanding.
Yeah, I mean, it relates to that social reproduction theory that's been under the spotlight, particularly this week alone. And you're speaking about capacity building, the upskilling of skills. You're also speaking about equal opportunity and access at the end of the day. So when we look at the mammoth tasks ahead, how do we begin to address this burden systemically, addressing multi-generation trauma from multiple generations?
I think, for one, a great place to start would be to accept that, okay, you failed to skill these people, but now young people have started to take issues into their own hands in a more meaningful way. I mean, when you go to the township and rural economies, you'll find young people having small businesses. And we say small businesses, real small businesses.
Yeah.
Someone starting a small little car wash, someone starting hair salons, someone starting, bread retailers, things like that. So government must play a role to ensure that they integrate those small businesses that these people have taken up initiative to start and integrate them into the mainstream economy. Now we've just had a crisis where Macro, your Checkers, your big retailers have been destroyed. Once they recover, government must say to these small independent retailers, look, you have your small bakery, you have your bread that you've been selling to communities. Macro, take these people and put them on the shelves. Take these independent butchery companies that we've seen emerging, supplying meat to communities that have had food shortages, integrate them into the mainstream economy because they're already doing these things. There are people working out of their houses who are supplying rolls and breads to communities that can't have access to the big Albanese and the big BPs because they've been simply not been operating. So government must integrate these small businesses into the mainstream economy in the meaningful way. You have people who have car washes who don't have education. You say to the taxi industry, guys, wash your cars here with this young person, Kwamashu, who's got their car wash. And that's how you start seeing meaningful ways, because small businesses tend to employ people more. When Uanele has a bakery company that is selling bread and she wants to go to a community, she's going to need a driver. She's going to need someone to deliver these things. So then that's when maybe she might hire a bonga. Government must make sure that they provide her with the scooter and the infrastructure to deliver her bread and all these small companies that they have. And then you begin to see them hiring one of their own, and you begin to see them really growing and dealing with the unemployment issue. So I think small businesses are going to be quite key, and a focus with the township economy and the rural economy, because that's where the most of these unemployed people are. So yeah, and then I mean in the more skilled sector, in terms of graduates who are sitting at home, government really needs to start forcing the hand of capital to employ these people. It's not just that you're sitting on billions of cash reserves that are literally sitting in bank accounts of big companies that are not hiring people, they're not expanding, they're not creating new branches, they're not creating new companies of their own. They're simply happy with the levels of labor that they have, and keep on increasing capital and not increasing the labor. So government actually needs to start forcing the hand of big business and say, listen, there's skilled people who are also sitting at home, hire them. And these are the incentives for hiring them as us as government, maybe tax cuts or whatever. So I really think with the focus on small business and empowering them with the infrastructure to integrate them into the mainstream economy, we'll actually start seeing young people playing more of a role in the mainstream economy and hiring each other.
So Bonga, you've now spoken about ways that we can perhaps navigate the knock-on effects, that we've been experienced after the protests and the looting that occurred this week, on both the micro and macro level. I think representation is also important, particularly to have the youth voice heard. When we look at leadership, we look at the top tier, there isn't much representation for the youth on that front as well. How do we begin to change that narrative, incorporate the youth more, particularly on this Nelson Mandela Day?
Well, it starts by the government taking young people more seriously, and removing all the barriers to entry when it comes to entering the job market, especially at a leadership level where they value things such as experience. You need like about 7 years of experience to hold a managerial position or a really big leadership positions. So I think we need to start removing those types of barriers and actually looking at what skills does this person have? Where have they led? I mean, if I've shown capability to lead, let's say at a community level, where I'm leading an NGO there, creating meaningful change in my community, where at student level, that person clearly can run organizations, they can clearly run institutions. So once you, and they clearly showed a propensity to have good ideas and really impact people meaningfully. So you take those people and you actually empower them, they have this, what we call the intergenerational mix. You take someone with experience who's been who's been working there for the past 20 years. You take whoever is a young person, and you put them both in the same department, and you allow them to learn from each other. I can learn from your experience as an old person, but you can also learn from my innovative ideas that I'm getting because I'm on the ground with other young people, really getting feedback in terms of ideas and how we can grow this country. So we need a real intergenerational mix, and governments and big business taking a real chance on young people who have shown capability and shown leadership skills in their various, whether student communities or even local communities. So you must actually believe that these people can, and they've shown that they can do it. These young people are the ones with all these ideas that government is implementing. But when you gatekeep and you only bring in people that are in your circle for whatever reasons, then you're not going to really address the leadership crisis. So we really do need more young people and those who have actually managed to access these positions. If I, as Bonga, access and become something in government or in business, I must make sure that it's not just me, but the person I left at WITS or UCT or back in my township, Ilamontu, who has shown capability to lead, I must bring them into the space, tell them that there's posts that are opening up, apply for this post, and I lobby internally to say, take this person, they've shown capability, obviously within the confines of the law, whatever appropriate lobbying processes that are involved, whether in business or in private sector, but really actively push for young people to enter into spaces, not just on TV or on social media, but inside those companies that you're working. If you see a job post, send it out to other young people, lobby internally for people that you know are capable. And that's how we'll actually see young people in high positions of leadership.
All right, Bonga, we're going to leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for echoing your sentiments. Again, Bonga Makanya, Secretary of the WITS Rethinking Economics for Africa, just joining us for a youth perspective on the aftermath of this week's protests and looting. All this as we observe Nelson Mandela Day today. Now, the corruption trial of former President Jacob Zuma and French arms manufacturer Thales is expected to resume in the Pietermaritzburg High Court on Monday. Zuma pled not guilty to all charges of racketeering, fraud and money laundering linked to the arms deal in the previous court appearance. The court is expected to hear Zuma's special plea to have state advocate Biddy Downer, senior counsel, removed from the trial, as the former president's plea alleges Downer is politically compromised because he supported court action by the Democratic Alliance. He allegedly illegally leaked information to a journalist and because he interacted with Leonard McCarthy of the disbanded Scorpions. Staying a look at the week ahead, an inquest into the Life Esidimeni tragedy will be held from tomorrow. The inquest will determine if anyone can be held criminally liable for the tragedy in which at least 144 mental health patients died. After a contract between the Gauteng Health Department and the Life Esidimeni Group in 2015 was terminated, the department moved the patients to non-governmental facilities. But due to neglect, dehydration and hunger, they died between March and December of 2016. Some went missing when they were moved and have still not been found. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Life Esidimeni Family Committee's Christine Numalo. Christine, a very good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for your time today. 5 years later, with no one criminally charged as of yet. How are you doing? How is your family doing as we speak?
Well, at this moment, thank you for having us. Well, at this moment, we are, I suppose, nervous. We are afraid and nervous and worried that the inquest might not result in people being charged.
Christine, are you ready for the mammoth task that lies ahead emotionally? Obviously, it's about reopening wounds that have been festering for 5 years now, still with no one being held responsible to date. The inquiry also might take, over 40 days. It involves many people giving testimony. How are you preparing yourself to cope?
There is really no way to prepare oneself. I think what's scary about the process is the detail that is going to come out of this process. It's detail we need to know, but it could be very traumatizing. You know, sometimes we want answers, but the question is, are we ready to hear the details? Because I think this time the details will be more than it was at the arbitration. But I suppose it's a process we have to go through. We're scared, we're afraid, we are nervous, you know, every emotion that you possibly could think of. But we would rather go through this process than not go through it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I dare not ask, or I dare ask rather about, you know, life 5 years later, having to find forgiveness somewhat as you navigate and await answers. Have you managed to forgive? Have you managed to somehow find some closure? And when we look at the inquest and what you're expecting as a family going forward, why does it matter so much that this inquest is finally coming to fruition?
It's to answer the part about forgiveness. You know, it's difficult to forgive.
Yeah.
I think the only part of forgiveness that we can deal with now is the forgiveness of oneself, because, you know, as family members, as those responsible for our loved ones, you know, the decision of taking, you know, of taking them to places like Systemically, where you believed it was a place to be, where, you know, even the doctors told you that it was a best place to take them to. And for this to happen takes some punishing and some trauma that one has to deal with personally first. As to forgiving others, there's nothing to forgive. You know, when someone does something deliberate, what do you forgive there? Because it shows the person that they are. They just need to go to jail. It's not for me to forgive. For me, it's just to hold them accountable. Life has been really hard because these moments come at you at waves. You know, sometimes you have better days, sometimes you don't have good days, and sometimes you barely can breathe. You know, and when days like these come, like the inquest, it's just a whole other story. I mean, you can't sleep. You don't want to get out of bed. You just don't want to live or go through life because you have to kind of like remind yourself about everything that had happened, you know, just in case you need to testify. Because the idea is that we must go through, get them to a point of justice, you know, get them accountable. And that's what our focus has been. I think we'll only be able to rest and I suppose just breathe after this process is done or after the charges have been laid.
Yeah, Christine Gumalo, we're going to leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Wishing you all the strength ahead of this inquest that is set to take place from tomorrow. Again, Christine Gumalo is one of the family members who have been impacted from the Life Esidimeni tragedy, which occurred 5 years ago. Again, she's going to be appearing at the inquest, which begins tomorrow. We'll continue to bring you developing news as that unfolds throughout the week. Now, in breaking news just in, 3 more alleged instigators of the past week's unrest have been arrested. The 3 were not part of the initial 12. For more on this, we are going to be bringing in our reporter, Reginald Witboy, to perhaps divulge a little bit more. Reginald, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Just quickly, with this breaking news emerging, what is the latest?
A very good afternoon to you, Liesel, and also to our viewers. Yes, Minister Bheki Cele, who's the police minister, he confirmed to us a short while ago that 3 more people have been arrested for instigating or alleged instigating this violence that rocked KwaZulu-Natal and also Gauteng this past week. Now, it's very important to note that they are not part of the initial 12. So the police had their names, so they were arrested, but their names are only going or the police are going to give us their names once they appear in court, but they are in custody and they are not forming part of the 12. We know that 1 was arrested also last week in West Rand, but the police was saying, or the police minister was saying that he's not going to give us any more details as to what happened into this matter, but he assured us that names will be given once these people have appeared, once they have appeared in court.
All right, Reginald Witboy, again, a reporter in KZN, just giving us the latest breaking news coming in. Alleged instigators of this past week's unrest have been arrested. As he highlighted, these are 2 additional members beyond the 12 that had initially been arrested. For more news and updates, we continue on the other side of this. But from myself, Liesl Wilson, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And from myself and the team, until next time, it is goodbye for now.